Beth pulled into the driveway of the old family home, her heart pounding as she eyed the once immaculate colonial facade, now marred by peeling white paint and stubborn weeds reclaiming the flower beds. The sight, a stark reminder of the 10 days since she'd last slept under that roof, and of the 4 agonizing days since her beloved twin daughters, Emma and Lily, had vanished without a trace, leaving only the memory of their laughter echoing through empty rooms. She sat for a moment in the driver's seat, her fingers trembling as she smoothed back a strand of her shoulder-length brown hair, recalling the hours she'd spent earlier that morning plastering flyers across telephone poles and community boards, each image of her girls' smiling faces twisting the knife of grief deeper into her chest until her hands ached and her vision blurred with unshed tears. Swallowing hard, Beth braced herself, drew in a slow breath of spring air, heavy with the scent of damp earth, and stepped out onto the cracked concrete path leading to the unlocked front door, a key left in place by Peter, her estranged husband, who clearly hadn't prioritized the lock since her departure. Stepping inside, Beth was greeted by a stale, musty odor, laced with the sour tang of whiskey that clung to faded drapes and scuffed hardwood floors long since abandoned to neglect. Her voice trembled as she called out, "Hello?" the sound bouncing off the walls of an empty foyer before leading her into the living room, where Detective Morris waited patiently in a worn armchair, his salt and pepper hair and kind, weathered eyes belying the burden of too many unsolved tragedies. On the couch beside him sat Peter, his reddish blonde hair tousled and uncombed, the shadow of a 3-day stubble darkening his jaw, while his mother, Claire, a frail woman in her 70s with wispy white hair, clutched a handkerchief so tightly her knuckles turned ghostly white, her wide eyes flitting from one face to the next as if expecting invisible specters to emerge from the shadows of the neglected parlor. Beth sank onto the edge of a dusty ottoman near the fireplace, the dusty mantle above it holding a jumbled collection of family photographs, some face down in haste as if someone had tried to erase the past and forced herself to steady her racing heart as Detective Morris closed his notepad with a soft snap and began, "Mrs. Harmon, thank you for coming. Let's revisit your statements to ensure we haven't missed a crucial detail." Peter's restless fidgeting punctuated the tense silence as Morris turned to him, pen poised, and asked him to recount that fateful afternoon. Once more, Peter sighed heavily, fingers running through his unkempt hair, and told them that around 4 o'clock the twins had begged to play hide-and-seek in the backyard, and after counting to 20, he'd lifted his eyes to find their small, giggling forms, nowhere to be seen, no peeks from behind the shed, no shouts from under the deck, only the haunting emptiness of a locked yard now revealed to be unlocked, an oversight Peter admitted with a careless shrug when pressed on the missing gate latch. Beth caught herself rolling her eyes, recalling the countless arguments they'd shared over Peter's growing negligence ever since he'd lost his bank executive position 2 years ago, and gripped the edge of the ottoman as Detective Morris gently shifted the conversation to her, asking why she'd left the house 10 days earlier. Straightening her back, despite Peter's accusatory glare, she explained in a measured voice that their marriage had been unraveling long before the girls disappeared, and that she'd taken refuge at the Pinewood Lakeside campground, hoping for space and peace, never imagining that the true nightmare would follow her home. Throughout Beth's account, Claire's uneasy twitching, a startled jump at every creak of the floorboards, the constant twisting of her handkerchief, drew Beth's attention, planting the first seeds of a suspicion that perhaps the grandmother, with her trembling hands and darting eyes, harbored secrets of her own. Beth's voice trembled as she explained to Detective Morris how, after years of watching Peter slip further into alcoholism following his job loss, she finally made the painful decision to move out, seeking solace at the peaceful Pinewood Lakeside campground. She described how what began as a few beers after dinner had escalated into nightly bottles of wine and then whiskey at all hours, despite her desperate attempts to support him and encourage treatment, until she realized that staying any longer would teach Emma and Lily that this was what marriage was supposed to look like. She paused, her eyes drifting to the faded photograph on the side table, the four of them beaming, the twins matching brown bobs and pink dresses framing their innocent faces in a moment captured just 6 months ago, its brightness at odds with the peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling overhead, physical markers of the neglect that had crept into every corner of their once-cherished home as Peter's drinking consumed their savings and their stability. Detective Morris leaned forward, gentle but insistent, and asked where she had been the afternoon the girls vanished. Beth met his gaze steadily, telling him she'd been on her 12-hour shift at Mercy General Hospital, dozens of co-workers ready to confirm her alibi, while Peter scoffed under his breath, and Claire, his mother, abruptly excused herself for water, her hands shaking so noticeably that Beth's suspicion flared. Claire had never shown such agitation in the 10 years she'd known her. Left alone for a moment with Peter and his mother, Beth pressed Claire, quietly asking how Peter had been coping, whether he'd eaten or slept. Claire's eyes darted toward the doorway, where Peter refilled his glass with what she claimed was water, but what Beth now suspected was vodka, and her reply, "He's just overwhelmed with grief," felt too clipped, too rehearsed. Later, while gathering fresh photos of the twins for the search dogs, Beth went to the girls' shared bathroom and found their butterfly-shaped toothbrush holders empty, then discovered their hairbrushes missing from the dresser drawer, odd items for a stranger to steal, raising an unsettling question. Could someone in that house have taken these tokens of her daughter's everyday lives? As she confronted Peter, catching the red rim of his eyes and the tremor in his voice when he denied knowing anything, Beth realized that this disappearance might not have been the random tragedy she'd feared, but something far closer to home. Beth's voice trembled as she confronted Peter in the chaotic kitchen, her eyes fixed on his unsteady gait and the half-empty glass of whiskey trembling in his hand as she pointed out, "The girls' toothbrushes and hairbrushes, they're gone. Do you know where they are?" Peter shrugged, dismissing her concern with a careless, "I probably misplaced them while cleaning," then took a long, deliberate sip of whiskey. The explanation rang hollow in Beth's ears. After all, the house bore every sign of neglect: dusty countertops, dirty dishes piled high in the sink, laundry spilling from an overstuffed hamper. Cleaning hardly seemed on Peter's agenda these days. She pressed him further, her skepticism creeping into her voice. "Peter, when was the last time you actually cleaned anything around here?" His expression darkened, hurt and indignation flashing through his bloodshot eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. "You think because you left I can't take care of our home and our children?" Beth forced her tone calm. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm only worried about those missing items. They might need them for DNA samples." The accusation lingered in the air, and Peter slammed his glass onto the countertop with such force that amber liquid sluiced over the edge. "Well, I don't know where they are," he growled. "Maybe if you hadn't abandoned us, things wouldn't be such a mess." Beth recoiled, recognizing the familiar flare of Peter's temper, a pattern of explosive defensiveness that had driven her away 10 days ago. "I didn't abandon our daughters," she whispered, hurt and anger warring in her chest. "I was trying to create a safer, healthier environment for all of us." Peter laughed bitterly. "How's that working out? Our daughters are missing while you've been playing house in your little camper." Before Beth could retort, Detective Morris returned, his face grim. "Mr. Harmon, we need to take another look at your backyard. The K9 unit is here." Peter rose unsteadily and followed the detective outside. Inside, Claire hovered in the doorway, pale and anxious, her thin hands twisting a handkerchief into frantic knots. She made as if to speak. "Beth, But her words died on her lips when Peter's voice drifted back from the yard. Fear immediately overtook her tentative resolve. Without another word, she retreated to the living room, leaving Beth with a fresh wave of unease. Whatever Claire had meant to reveal could not be said in earshot of Peter. As the afternoon wore on, Beth wandered the empty rooms, retracing every corner in search of clues the police might have overlooked. She found herself back in the kitchen, scrubbing grimy dishes that had clearly been left for days, her hands working in a rhythm to steady her racing thoughts. Claire appeared again, voice barely above a whisper. "Beth, I need to tell you something. About the girls, I think." But before she could finish, Peter re-entered, bearing another glass of whiskey, his eyes dangerously sharp. "What are you two whispering about?" he demanded, leaning unsteadily against the doorframe. Claire's composure snapped. She stuttered out, "I was just saying we should make more flyers, perhaps with a different photo this time," and plunged into an awkward silence. Beth turned off the tap and dried her hands on a tea towel, studying Claire's taut expression. She had lied, that much was clear, but why? What had she been about to say about Emma and Lily? Peter's gaze drifted back to Beth, accusatory once more. "The police asked about you earlier. They wanted to know where you were before your shift," he said, with heavy implication. Beth's pulse hammered. "I already told them. I was at the campground until I left early for work." She paused, meeting his gaze steadily. "I left the campground at 6:15 a.m. to make my 7:00 a.m. shift." Peter swirled the whiskey in his glass, murmured, "Funny thing is, no one saw you there that morning. The manager said your camper was on site, but you weren't." The question hung like a guillotine blade. Were they suggesting Beth had something to do with the disappearance? She felt a surge of anger. "Are you implying I had something to do with my daughter's vanishing?" she snapped. Peter shrugged, expression unreadable. "I'm just saying, you left us 10 days ago, and now our girls are gone without a trace." Beth's chest tightened. "I didn't abandon anyone, only you, Peter. I was planning to file for custody once I found us a proper home." Claire hurried between them, thin hands raised in a pleading gesture. "Please, Peter." Her interruption felt desperate, but Beth's mind raced with new alarm. In this house of secrets and shifting loyalties, she could no longer be sure who, if anyone, she could trust. Beth felt her blood run cold as Peter's unsteady finger jabbed toward her. "Maybe you took them," he snarled, his voice thick with whiskey and accusation. The words landed like a blow. "That's absurd," she gasped, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "They're my children. I would never—" Peter cut her off, sneering. "The police are even asking about your mental state, how you managed after the separation." He leaned in, eyes rimmed red. "Remember your postpartum depression? How you'd forget whether you'd fed them, how you'd break down in tears over nothing." Shame and anger coiled in Beth's chest. "That was different," she whispered fiercely. "I got help. I got better." "Or maybe you're still pretending," Peter mocked, stumbling forward. "Perhaps you took the girls somewhere and blocked it out of your memory." "Stop it, Peter," Beth's voice cracked. "This isn't about me or you. It's about finding Emma and Lily." "They're my daughters, too," he roared, slamming his glass down until it shattered, whiskey spraying across the tile. "They disappeared under my watch, and now everyone thinks I'm a monster." His mother, Claire, recoiled with a small gasp. Peter pointed at Beth. "Get out of my house," he demanded, staggering toward her. "You forfeited all rights the moment you walked away 10 days ago." Beth took a steadying breath, forcing calm into her tone. "Fine," she said, gathering her purse and phone. "I'm leaving, but mark my words, this isn't over. I will find our daughters." As she slipped out into the fading light, Peter's final barb followed her down the hall. "Maybe you should start by checking your own camper." Outside, the winding road back to Pinewood Lakeside Campground unfurled before her, lined with towering pines and the blood-red glow of sunset. Tears blurred Beth's vision as she navigated the curves, each twist of the wheel echoing Peter's taunts in her mind. Could the police truly suspect her? The thought was unthinkable. Emma and Lily were her world. She reached the deserted campsite as dusk settled over the lake, its surface dark and still. Her 16-foot travel trailer stood solitary among the scattered rigs, its little furnace humming to ward off the evening chill. Inside, the cramped space felt both comforting and claustrophobic. A small dinette that folded into a bed, a kitchenette with 2 burners, a minuscule bathroom, the only home she'd had in days. A colorful throw draped over the backrest, framed family photographs on the shelf, and especially the one of her twins on their 2nd birthday, bright, carefree, whole. Beth heated a can of soup on the stove but could only sip at it. Her appetite had vanished alongside her daughter's. Every spoonful grew cold as her mind raced through the day's unnerving clues, the vanished toothbrushes and hairbrushes, Claire's trembling secrecy, Peter's violent outbursts, and the obsessive guarding of his study. None of it added up if a stranger had truly snatched the girls from the backyard. Grabbing her notebook, Beth sat at the dinette and began to scratch out a timeline of events. She numbered the days carefully, starting with the morning she left. Day 1. I moved out with only a suitcase, determined to build a safer life. Peter was furious, blaming me for breaking up our family. Day 2. I settled into the camper, unpacked their clothes, hung photos of Emma and Lily to keep me focused. I called their school to alert them we'd be gone for a week. Day 3. Flyers printed. I distributed them around town, stapling their smiling faces to boards and poles until my hands ached. No sightings yet. Day 4. The phone rang with false leads. A neighbor's cat? A prank call? My hope dimmed as daylight faded. Day 5. Today. I returned home. Found the toothbrushes and hairbrushes gone. Claire's hand shaking. Peter's paranoia. The K9 search. And now? Beth paused, breathing deeply, then continued to fill in the hours. Every meal she skipped, every confused glance from the camp manager, every moment of fearful waiting. As the clock ticked toward midnight, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would follow these clues wherever they led, because Emma and Lily deserved nothing less than a mother's relentless love. Over the first few days after Emma and Lily vanished, our video calls remained eerily calm. No tears, no frantic sobs, just their little faces lighting up when I promised I'd see them soon, as if they somehow knew I was coming for them. On days 2 and 3, Peter's demeanor was civil but distant, his words clipped as he stood just outside the camera's frame, a silent sentinel. By day 4, when I finally held their tiny hands at the park, the twins played happily on the swings while Peter watched in stony silence, never offering more than a curt nod. On day 5, our video calls grew tense. Peter interrupted me mid-sentence, cutting the connection short. And then, on day 6, Peter claimed they'd disappeared while playing hide-and-seek in the backyard, an explanation that felt hollow, even as I clung to hope. For the next 3 days, I poured every ounce of myself into leafleting the neighborhood, answering police questions, and reliving those final hours in my mind. But Peter's insistence that he'd only misplaced their toothbrushes and hairbrushes, I might have cleaned them up, he'd shrugged, echoed in my thoughts. The man who couldn't remember to put his clothes in the hamper was now obsessed with scrubbing. Bathroom fixtures? It made no sense. And then there was Claire's aborted confession, her eyes wide with fear until Peter's booming voice silenced her. Something wasn't right, and I could feel the pieces of a terrible puzzle slipping through my fingers. Late that night, when the campground lay quiet beneath the whispering pines, there was a soft knock on my camper door. Through the small window, I saw Claire's haggard face, her hair in disarray, eyes haunted. She slipped inside, locking the door behind her, her voice trembling as she confessed, "They're alive, and they're in the house." My heart thundered as she explained how, while dusting Peter's study, she'd accidentally dislodged a book and discovered The entire bookcase swung open to reveal a hidden chamber. There, huddled on a small mattress surrounded by toys, books, and the very toothbrushes and hairbrushes that had gone missing, were Emma and Lily, unharmed, bewildered, but safe. Claire's tears fell as she recounted confronting Peter, whose shame-filled confession laid bare his darkest fear. He'd staged their disappearance so I couldn't take them in our divorce, convinced he'd rather the world think them gone than let me have custody. Relief and betrayal crashed over me in a single wave, but one truth shone brighter than any heartbreak. My daughters were alive, and I would stop at nothing to bring them home. Beth's heart hammered as Peter's accusation echoed in the cramped space, his wild eyes fixed on her, the gun trembling in his grip. She knew she had to stall, to keep him talking until help arrived. "Peter," she began, her voice calm and steady, "I swear I didn't lie. I want you and the girls more than anything, but you have to let them go now so they can come to us themselves." He hesitated, the corners of his mouth twitching, torn between fury and longing. In that split second, Claire's hand slipped free from her pocket and darted for the door latch, inching it open just enough for a sliver of moonlight to fall on the dial tone of the 911 call, still connected in her palm. Feeling the shift in the air, Peter's gaze flicked between them. He hesitated, the gun lowering a fraction as doubt flickered behind his bloodshot eyes. I can't lose you," he whispered, voice raw, and Beth tilted her head slightly, offering him a chance. "You won't lose us, Peter. If you let Emma and Lily come to us, we can get help. We can heal together." Claire, silent and resolute, edged the door wider, ready to slip out the moment Peter's back was turned. Outside, in the thick hush of the night, the distant wail of sirens began to rise, faint at first, then growing nearer. Peter's breath caught, his grip on the gun loosening just enough for Claire to slip free, her foot falling softly on the gravel. As the door swung open behind her, showering the camper in cool night air, Beth seized the moment, stepping toward the hidden bookcase in the study, her voice low but firm. "Girls, it's Mommy. Come out now. You're safe." And from the darkness beyond the swinging wall, tiny, startled voices answered her call. Beth's blood ran cold as Peter's trembling finger tightened on the trigger, the camper's flimsy walls rattling under his rage, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed suspended between his madness and the distant wail of sirens, until Claire flung open the door to freedom and learned that her desperate whisper to 911 had already brought help racing through the night. In an instant, 2 officers burst inside, weapons drawn and voices booming, and Peter froze, the pistol pressed to his temple as tears tracked down his gaunt cheeks. "Drop the weapon," the taller officer commanded with calm authority, and at last, Peter's shoulders sagged, the gun clattering to the floor with a hollow thud as he whispered, "My daughters. I just wanted to keep my daughters." In the blink of an eye, hands reached for him and secured the cuffs around his wrists, the man who had once been her husband, now trembling in uniformed hands, grief and regret etched into every line of his face. Detective Morris appeared in the doorway moments later, his expression tight with relief and sorrow as he guided Beth out into the cool night air and asked, "Mrs. Harmon, are you all right?" Her voice caught in her throat as she nodded, tears blurring the red and blue strobe lights that danced across the gravel. "The girls," she gasped. "They're at the house, in the hidden room behind Peter's bookcase." Morris's eyes widened, and without hesitation, he barked orders into his radio, dispatching units to the colonial home she'd fled so recently. "Search behind. The bookcase. There's a concealed chamber." Beth, shivering in the night breeze, wrapped her arms around herself as Claire joined her at the detective's side, her frail shoulders shaking with silent sobs of relief and guilt, and together they climbed into the back of the cruiser, where Beth pressed her forehead against the cool glass, staring back at Peter's broken figure in the other vehicle, feeling not triumph, but profound sorrow for the man he'd become. As the cruiser roared toward the house, her mind raced with questions. Had Emma and Lily thought they were forgotten? Were they hungry, frightened, or confused by their father's betrayal? Had Peter whispered lies about their mother? Every moment counted now. Beth squeezed Claire's hand, determined that when they burst through that bookcase door, her daughters would know only one thing, that she had never truly left them and would never stop fighting to bring them home. The officers piled out of their vehicles and fanned across the darkened street, their breath visible in the cold night air as flashing lights cut through the inky sky, and my heart pounded so loudly I felt it in my ears as we approached the peeling front steps of the house where time itself seemed to have forgotten us. Detective Morris gently took the trembling weight of my keys from my overshaking fingers, turned on the porch light to reveal the weed-choked beds and flaking paint that spoke of months of neglect, and unlocked the door without a word, guiding Claire and me through the musty foyer redolent of stale whiskey and long-forgotten meals, while uniformed officers swept the main floor with measured efficiency before converging on Peter's study, its heavy drapes drawn against the chill, and a cluttered desk littered with empty glasses that caught the glare of their flashlights. Claire led us to the towering bookcase that dominated the far wall, its rows of leather-bound tomes impressive but unread, and with a wavering finger she pointed to the single volume of The Secret Garden, its spine jutting forward, and my pulse leaped as I reached out to pull it free, hearing the soft click that betrayed the hidden hinge behind, just as I dared to hope, and with a collective heave the entire right section of shelving swung inward, unveiling a narrow chamber barely 8 feet square, lit by a single lamp, and furnished with a mattress draped in the twins' favorite blankets, stuffed animals lined up like sentinels, a shelf of picture books and snacks, a portable potty and neatly folded clothes in the corner, each detail chilling in its quiet normalcy until our breath caught in our throats, and there, huddled side by side on the mattress with tangled brown hair and sleepy eyes wide in confusion, were Emma and Lily wearing matching pajamas, blinking up at us as if waking from a dream. "Mommy?" came a small, uncertain voice that sent my knees crumbling beneath me, and before I knew it, the girls were tumbling into my arms in a tangle of limbs and tears, their tiny faces buried in my coat as I kissed every freckle and braid of hair, breathing in the familiar sweetness of their shampoo mixed with relief so intense it felt like drowning in air, while Claire stood off to the side, shoulders trembling, silent tears carving lines down her face as she watched her granddaughters cling to me in bewildered joy, and the officers calmly stepped forward to document the scene, photographing the hidden room from every angle, collecting the missing toothbrushes and hairbrushes from their shelf in evidence bags, and assuring Emma and Lily that this special hiding game was over now. Before we all filed out of that secret chamber into the winter night, the weight of fear lifting to a tenuous hope that, at last, we were all coming home together. As Emma's small voice wavered, "You're going home with your mommy, but Daddy said we had to hide until she found her way back." My heart clenched at Peter's cruel manipulation, yet I forced my tone gentle as I knelt before my trembling daughters and whispered, "I was never lost, my loves. I was searching for you every moment, and now that I've found you, we're never apart again." Detective Morris approached softly, his expression melting at our reunion, and explained that, as protocol in cases like this, the girls would need a quick medical examination, but reassured me I could stay by their side. I nodded, pressing Emma and Lily close as paramedics arrived, their gentle questions and smiling faces a balm to our ordeal, while I wrapped each of them in a warm blanket before leading them out into the cool night toward the ambulance, their eyes wide at the flashing lights and neighbors gathering in hushed curiosity. "Where's Daddy?" Emma asked, glancing back at the dark silhouette of our home. I hesitated until Claire stepped forward, her voice soft yet steady. "Daddy had to go away for a while, sweetheart." shielding them from the full truth until they were safe. As we rode side by side on the gurney to the hospital, with Emma and Lily clutching hands as they always had, Lily's worried question, "Why did Daddy make us hide in the wall?" broke my heart. I stroked her hair and whispered, "Daddy was confused. Honey, he thought this was the way to keep us together, but he was wrong." Emma shuddered. It was dark and scary, and I held both girls to my chest, promising that the game was over and they would never be frightened again. In the quiet of the waiting room, Claire and I sat together, silent tears mingling as she confessed, "I failed them once, first with my own father, now with Peter. I chose loyalty over their safety." But I reached for her hand and assured her, "No, you broke the cycle today by saving them. That is courage, not failure." When a nurse called our names, Claire looked astonished at my side. I smiled and said simply, "You're their grandmother. They need to know that making things right matters." Cradling Emma and Lily as they emerged from the exam room, healthy and resilient despite everything, I felt a fierce hope taking root. The cycle of fear and control ends here. My daughters will grow up knowing that true love sets you free. And tonight, as we faced our darkest hours and found our way back to each other, we became a family reborn, bound by love and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.